Thank you. And Fiona, I think you're sitting on my butt kicker chair there. It's got a nice ouch written on the back of it. So, just saying. So I always like to start with 3 questions. I won't bother reading them here. But so tell me, who in the room loves selling? You're kind of in a former life, you should have been a car salesman. That's interesting. All Hub people, but nobody in the membership. Okay, so who here kind of feels they could get a little bit better at selling? That there's some stuff that they could. It's good. That is the majority. And who here would, frankly, rather stick pins in their eyes than sell? Oh, okay, so there's always one of those in the room, which is a bit tricky, isn't it, when you're running your own business? So hopefully we'll have lots of tips and ideas for you today. So I'm Vanessa Lanham-Day. As we've established, I'm known as the butt kicker, but my main business is On Track Marketing. I'm a business and marketing business growth mentor. I started my own business back in 1988, so you work out how many bloody years that is, far too many. But yeah, I've worked with lots of different people along the way, and the inability to sell, I have to say, is probably like a unifying factor amongst small business owners. We're all great at the thing we do, but less good at convincing other people about it. There's that kind of form an orderly queue, and I'll deliver what I'm really good at, but actually you just soon discover it's a lot harder than that. So after all these years, hopefully I can bring some experience to you. So I'm known as the butt kicker, so I do always like to make sure that out of these sessions you do walk away with some practical knowledge and some stuff that you can do. Gareth, are there some workbooks? Louise, the workbooks I sent through, have we printed those out? There's a workbook that goes with this, and by the end of the session you'll all have a copy, because I did this talk in Farnham, gosh, when would this have been? Maybe 6 months ago. And bearing in mind, the same reason perhaps you guys have gathered here today, because the topic perhaps, is sort of ticked a box for you. That's an area I think I could do well at. So we had about 20 people in the room, so I assumed they'd come because they felt they could learn something. Well, a couple of weeks later, I was invited back to run the How You're Getting On session. The normal person who ran it wasn't there, so they said, well, why don't you come back and do it as it was your talk? And what was interesting in asking people how they'd got on, and they'd all got the workbook, only 2 people in the room could significantly tell me anything they'd actually done as a result. And one person had come across quite a major blockage, and turns out she wasn't implementing one of the steps particularly well, but we could help her with that because she'd tried some stuff out. And another person who'd absolutely transformed their sales process and was already getting results. But effectively, the other 18 people in the room, nothing had changed because they had done nothing. So if you leave today's session with no other lesson, and please change something, implement something. A lot of what I'll talk to you about perhaps comes around from my experience of consultancy selling. Your job is to adapt that to make it about design or hypnotherapy or kitchens, that there's a different version, but you're selling to human beings, that the basics will be the same for everybody. Your job is to adapt it, not just go, oh, well, that was interesting, and then carry on doing exactly the same as you did before. You will get nothing out of it. There is little point in you coming to these sessions, so please be that 1 or 2 people who made a difference, because they were the people getting results. So essential steps to powerful conversations. There is no magic bullet. If anybody thought there was one, you have to work at this skill and craft it to make it work for you. So a lot of what I'm saying, as I just said, it will need adaptation. You need to think, what is my version of that? This isn't a sort of pick up and run system. There is a workbook, so that we'll get that towards the end of the session, I hope.
There will also be a version of it to download if you don't get it.
Okay. So a lot of what I will talk about, anybody here heard of the Sandler sales system? Does that ring a bell? Okay, yeah, a couple of you. Now, Sandler, it's a course of study. I paid to learn that skill set. There is my manual, and it came with about 20 CDs as well. So I'm going to try and distill that in the next 45 minutes. So, sorry? It's a weighty number. It's a very American, and I guess these days it would all be downloadable, wouldn't it? It was a few years back, but there's a lot of studies, so I can only kind of skim the surface, but it's a very large area of study if you want to go into it, and you can find a lot of the Sandler stuff online, and many other systems as well. But one of the things Sandler used to say was that if you don't have a selling system, you will by definition default to your buyer's buying system. And I think it's just interesting. If you don't have a system, their system will take over. And your customer's system will involve you giving them as much information and value as possible, with them making the least amount of commitment as possible. And how many times have you found you've gone in and you've practically designed somebody's kitchen, you've given them all the ideas, and you've left the room knowing they loved you and it was an absolute certainty, and then you never heard from them again?
9 times out of 10.
That's what we all do. You do. Everybody in this room does it. You go into the room, you get all of that knowledge, and then you go away and you buy it on Amazon or whatever your equivalent of that may be. And so unless you have a system to counter that, that is what largely will happen. And so it's all about, say, what is your version of that system? So tell me about your sales conversations. What goes really well and what do you hate the most? So, Michelle, what do you love about selling? Do you get much customer face-to-face stuff?
I don't. Stuart would do more of that.
Okay. So what would you say goes really well for him? What does he do really well?
The fact that he has a real deep knowledge and is very, very honest about what customers can actually achieve within their budget.
Okay. And what doesn't go so well?
Probably his confidence in
Okay.
himself.
Okay, so perhaps it's sort of apologising a bit. Okay then, what about Scott? What goes really well for you when you sell?
I tend to be able to form connections with the customer, get on personally.
Okay, where are the areas for development?
Learn not to get too technical.
Okay, sort of blinding them with science and what have you, and not perhaps listening more to their needs. Anybody else got some big fears about selling?
Oh, I prefer to build up a rapport and a relationship with somebody so that they want to try and buy. I don't go out there
Overtly
these
to
colours
sell.
are lovely and why don't you? Do you
Okay.
understand what
Yeah.
I try to find out if there's something where I think that they would like it, so it's build that rapport first and then offer it. And,
Okay.
so it's very much that way.
Well, do any of these,
I don't hate selling.
are any of these familiar? Who here likes talking about money?
No.
You don't. You don't. So it's a very definite no. You don't like so soon it's kind of how much does it cost? There's a very nice, good facial expression there. Oh, it's a bit scary, isn't it? It's all very un-British, the whole money thing. Appearing pushy or salesy. So Rob, you're nodding there. And anyway, perhaps that's what you're saying. You know, you'd much rather have. Oh, you don't want to do that. That sense of lack of integrity. Who wants to totally be like the Anglican, not Anglican, Anglian? Which that's probably the Anglicans these days as well. Isn't it? Anglian window salesman. Who wants to be that that person? It's all just a bit, pressured and horrible, isn't it? We tend to, particularly the Brits, the Americans. It sounds like it's very sort of too standard to say, but the Americans are much better at that. We have a lot of reserves about what's right to say to people. Whoever has heard this, I'll think it over. Again, nice with a smile there, Russ. I'll think about it, I'll let you know. Okay, we hear that a lot. I'll come back to you. That's too expensive. Oh, I wasn't expecting that. So you're nodding there. Oh, it's just not the right time for me. Yeah, not the right. So I love the sound of what you do. I'm not sure the time is quite right. And the reality is these are all just excuses. And it often comes down to the fact that you've not done the job right sooner. Think it over. You shouldn't be allowing them that time, or they shouldn't be allowing them to take away the power. I'll come back to you means I won't come back to you. It's too expensive means you've not really dealt with the value of what it is that you do. Not the right time. It's just an easy get out, isn't it, to know. They're all versions of no. But we tend to bank them as possibles, so that's one that's in the pipeline. So you end up having this kind of investment in a whole bunch of people who you think are going to buy, and the reality is they're probably not going to, and your time is being wasted. And if you look into the Sandler system in particular, they're very focused on helping you achieve no's. Because it's far better if they really are a no, get rid. Stop wasting your time on them. But recognise these things for what they are. And it's really frustrating, especially when you know they need what you do. You've formed a great rapport, you've listened to them, you've heard all the things. This is what we do is exactly right. But you're going to think it over, you're going to come back to me, you're not quite the right time, there's a frustration there. And all of those things tell me you don't have enough of a system to have countered that, and you've maybe tried to sell too early on in the system. Who's heard this phrase about communication? So little of it is about what we say. And of course, when you go into a sales conversation, it's all around what I'm going to say to them, all the things you're going to tell them about what you do and why it's good. But in fact, 55% of communication is your body language. 38% is your intonation. So when you have someone who's not confident, who's got issues with that, you're going to perhaps be almost telling people you're not quite good enough through your intonation. Only 7% of communication is with your actual spoken words. So the attitude in which you go into a selling conversation is incredibly powerful. It's not just about what you say to them. So about having the confidence of being, running this sales system and not allowing them to take control with their buying system. So I think this is an interesting area of one called transformational analysis. Transactional analysis. So who's heard of transactional analysis? It's an interesting area of psychology that talks about the fact that we operate in three states. We operate as a parent, we operate as a child, and we operate in a place in between called the adult. So who here, when they've been selling, has found that maybe the customer seems to have all the power? They've got all they're up there, and you're the little selling person. Oh, please throw me a few of your breadcrumbs if you've got anything you can spare me. So do you feel you have this relationship where they're all powerful? Does that ring a bell? You're nodding there, Scott. So that sounds familiar to people, where in an ideal world, what we'd really like are these two more even people having proper adult conversations with each other. This is what I do. This is what you need. Is there a match? Can we do business together? If we can, let's do it. If not, let's all move on. And a good selling system will help you achieve that. So as I say, transactional analysis, because what we're seeing with this first relationship is what's known as a parent-child, where the customer is the parent and you are the child. And we want to move from that to this adult-to-adult state. And in the parent to child, we have a critical and nurturing state. So when someone's being critical, that's too expensive. Oh, I wasn't expecting that. Oh, no, that's not right for me. They're becoming critical. You become defensive. And it's going, oh, that's not fair. That's not right. Our stuff's really good. And it becomes a very dysfunctional relationship with you. Where an adult to adult is a much more powerful state for you. Not really the right time to go into all of that. So we want to put you into your nurturing parent state or your adult state. So when you're a nurturing parent in a relationship, it's kind of, I've listened to what you've said. I can really understand how we can help you. These are the things. We're going to pick you up. We're going to take you through this process, make you feel really good. They feel very empowered. Or we go into this adult state. So again, a useful area for you to perhaps have a look at. Google transactional analysis. A lot you can learn in terms of your selling skills. If you learn how to judge the relationships that are going on in the room. So much of this is all before you've said anything at all. So, my essential steps. So this is going to dictate more of the things that you say, but so make sure you're mindful of all the things you can be doing about managing the atmosphere in the room by understanding the people. So, essential steps. So this is what somebody said to me after Does anybody know Lucia? You know Lucia, didn't you? She said this to me after she's terrified of sales. She does like career transformation for people. Terrified of selling to people, appearing salesy. And she said this to me after we'd worked together. I worked through the final sales process, which you helped me with, and got a new client signing up today. It was easier than I could have imagined. It felt as if I was being myself. I think that's really powerful. I feel so much more excited about the 2 more sales calls I have scheduled. So a proper selling system can really help that confidence in going to something which most small business owners are reasonably fearful about. So here are the 7 steps. And we're going to go through these one at a time. So, setting the scene, finding out what they need, diving deeper, finding out if they're serious, explaining how much better things can be, delivering your solution, and getting a decision for them. Those are the 7 steps. So let's start with step number 1. And these, when you get the workbook, these points will be on there, so that's a useful reminder for you. So setting the scene, now this is all about taking control in the conversation. So when I said earlier, unless you have a selling system, you'll allow them to come with their buying system. So taking control. So whether this is on the phone, I do a lot of Zoom calls when my selling process. It could be your face-to-face, it could be in the showroom, but it's about taking charge of the process. If you allow it to go on too long with your, has it been a good journey here today? Isn't the weather nice? Would you like a coffee? The right person is going to step in and go, right, this is what I want, how much does it cost, when can you deliver, and you've now given them the opportunity to take charge of what is going on. So this is all about you stepping in and establishing the rules of how this conversation is going to go. So taking charge and taking control. So if you don't take control, they absolutely will. About being firm, not bossy, so it's about being assertive, not aggressive, but being clear about how things are going to be. Guiding them through what's going to be covered. Okay, what would be really useful if I could find out a little bit more about what you want to get done with the bedrooms? You have some questions you want to ask me. I'll be asking about how you work at home and how the family interacts in the kitchen or whatever it may be. And at the end of it, I'll have some good ideas. We'll go through a few ideas. How does that sound? So you're taking charge. You're delivering your agenda to them. It instills confidence. Who wants to be being sold to someone who doesn't seem to know what's happening next? It allows them to think, oh, this person, I'm in safe hands. This person seems to know what's going on. Very powerful. And you also get permission to make your pitch. Make it clear what is going to happen at the end. At the end of our chat today, I'll probably have a good idea about what you're going to need, the kind of ways in which we can help you, and I'll be able to give you an idea of what that might cost or how it might work. Does that sound fine? So make it clear that is what is going to happen at the end of the conversation. Get your permission. Now, this doesn't need to take very long. This isn't a 15-minute process. Your process is going to be pretty much the same for everybody. You should get this down off pat in 2 or 3 sentences. It allows them to understand what's happening next. And as I say, it can work on the phone, face-to-face, Zoom call, Skype call, or whatever. Taking charge. And at the end, it might sound something like, at the end, I'll show you some ways in which I can help you with that, if that's okay with you. If I don't think I can help, I will say so. So make it clear that if you don't think your problem is something you can solve, that you will have the... Yeah, so that honesty, it really helps people believe what you're saying. If what we establish is I'm not the right people to help you, what you need is an internal gym, not an outside, then I'll be really honest with you about that. So, establish what is your agenda, what is your opening pitch. Write a little script, because if you start well, it's really powerful. So get that off so it's nicely rehearsed and easy to say to people. And from then, we're going to enter 2 stages of questioning, because understanding what they want is so important, and it's too easy for you to jump in at this stage and go, let me tell you about what we do. That's a mistake a lot of small business owners make. It's really important that you understand fully what it is they need. And we need to do that in 2 stages, because to fully understand, you're going to have to ask some quite deep questions. maybe about things like the money, what the issues, who the other decision makers are, what's going wrong. I mean, certainly for you, you're dealing with some quite powerful emotional stuff. You need people to trust you before they're going to tell you that. So the important thing is kind of start light, start easy. Let's establish the basic facts. What's going on here? What brought you here today? What are we talking about? So find out what they need, clarification from you. How do they see the problem? And what's really important here is just turn on those kind of curiosity ears of yours. Stop being a salesman, just be interested. Just remember the reason you started doing what you do and why you're interested in that subject. Ask really good questions about what is it they want, how you can help, understand the nuance of their problems. Step out of sales mode, so be curious, be interested in them. Be really human, that they will warm to that genuine interest. Don't just be looking for opportunities to sell. Listen. Remember they say that you were gifted with 2 ears and 1 mouth, and to use them in that proportion. So listen to the things that they say to you. Build trust and rapport. So this is quite a light session. So it's useful to maybe think about when you get the workbook is note down what sorts of questions you are likely to be asking at this stage. It might be a bit about the nature of their business, how they see themselves compared to the competition, perhaps things they like. Perhaps they might have brought in some examples. So just get all the basic facts out, because it's going to set you up for this next stage, which is massively more powerful, which is what we call diving deeper, where we're really uncovering the issues. Because at the end of that first stage, in many ways, it should have left you with more questions than answers. You kind of, why are they thinking of doing it that way? I don't quite understand that bit. That doesn't seem quite right to me. There's a bit of a conundrum there for me. You need to start thinking, well, hold on a minute. I don't quite understand that. You may need to get permission to start asking some of those questions. You might say, I'm now going to ask you a few more kind of challenging questions, if that's okay, so I can really get to grips with what it is you're saying. There's a few things you've said to me today I'm not too sure about. Is that okay? So it's worth thinking about, again, depends how personal some of the things you're going to be asking. Certainly when you start asking about money, feelings, and what have you, it's worth getting that permission. But you're going to start asking far more challenging questions. A big warning here is you don't try and solve the problem. I mean, you must find this, Stuart. You hear people say, this is happening with Google, or I'm having this problem with, blocks on my website. And you know exactly what the problem is. It's very easy to jump in and try and be an expert, but you need to allow them to tell you their problem. They always say that about the difference between men and women. Men have a habit of trying to sort of solve women's problems for them. And actually all we really want is someone to listen to the ruddy problem. We don't want your solution. Just acknowledge the fact. You see, all the ladies understand this. And it's true. We want people to hear our problem, not the fact, it's not about you telling me you're an expert. I need you to understand what's going on for me. So it's about stepping back and not trying to solve it for them. You need to ask really tough questions, and you need to think about in advance what your tough questions sound like, because for you, they all sound similar-ish for many of your customers. And so it could be about budget, it could be when you're selling into a business, it might be about different levels of authority. You may find yourself talking to sort of the junior person who hasn't got the ability to say yes. And so now we've got to start challenging their role in the hierarchy. That can be quite a difficult thing to do. So you need to work out how to do that. So it's going to sound something like, how does that feel? What's the impact of that on you? Now, given what I sell to people, and the kind of consultancy I do, I often talk to people where perhaps things have gone on and on and on, and things are becoming quite desperate. And I need to understand, how much longer can this go on? If we don't fix this, what happens next? If we're still in this situation in a year's time, what's the impact on you? Because it's only when you start to understand those things, when it comes to measuring what you can do and the money you're going to charge them, they can start to balance the value against the money that it's going to take. So if you don't take them to that place, you're not going to help them understand what the solution is. I mean, they might have quite a complicated kitchen brief, but they think they can do the whole thing for, under 5,000, and you're hearing 30 as they're listening. And then we suddenly get to that point. So unless you're helping them understand the complexity of what's going on, and the fact they need it to go through into the outside space and have things emerging from the floor or whatever it may be, unless they understand the impact of that, they're not going to understand the value. So you need to think through what are your questions that are really going to challenge them. Talking about Sandler, that there's if you Google the Sandler pain funnel, you will see this. There's hundreds of versions of it on the internet, but they talk about a pain funnel where the questions get increasingly intense. And you need to think about what is your version of this funnel. So tell me more about that. Can you be a bit more specific? Give me an example. How long has that been a problem? What have you tried to do about that? And did that work? What kind of security systems have you had? Well, didn't cost them very much, but didn't actually work either. You need to allow them to explore that before the penny will drop that system's really not working for them. They need to do something differently. How much do you think that's cost you? What's the impact of having made that decision? Blimey, that was costly, wasn't it? How do you feel about that? Well, I nearly lost everything. Right, that must have been tough. Have you given up trying to deal with the problem? So you can see as these progress, they become more and more potentially emotive. Now, maybe the challenges in selling a kitchen, in terms of the emotional depths involved, maybe are slightly different to, for someone like me, where you're dealing perhaps with the future of people's business, but there is your version of this. And, the kitchen is the heart of the family. It is an emotional place. Maybe there's things to do with the kids moving on and feeling like, that the loss of and the change of people's family relationships, the fact they want everyone to be coming back at weekends. Understand that. Understand just how important this space could be for them. And that will really help you deliver a fantastic solution and will differentiate you, because most people don't do this. And they don't do it well, for sure. So again, think about this in advance. You don't want to be doing this on the fly in the moment, but think about in advance the sorts of things that you could be asking people. An interesting concept that Sandler talks about is one called reversing. You may find when things get a bit tough, people will suddenly pitch in with, oh, this is all very well, but how much does it cost? How much is this likely to cost me? Has anybody ever found that happening to them? You're suddenly thrown off balance halfway through your pitch, and someone goes, oh, what's the cost of that? So they talk about reversing, and it's essentially answering a question with a question. Politicians are brilliant at this. It's always, I suspect Boris is better than most. So be aware of the fact that people will use questions to you as a way of diverting the focus from them and putting it back onto you. It's an attempt by them to take control of what's happening. And another important Sandler concept is, the issue is never the issue. When they say how much is that, that's not really the issue. They don't really want to know how much it is. It might be, sheesh, this is sounding great, but we've got a really limited budget, and I've got a real, so we need to understand what the impact of budget is on them, or how soon could you deliver that? Oh, right, I need to understand it's because the in-laws are coming for Christmas, and actually so that's the issue, not when you can deliver it. So we need to reverse and ask them the question. So, oh, that's interesting you should say that. Is price important to you? Well, yes, it is, because I've only got a signing budget of £5,000. If it goes over that, I've got to bring someone else in. Or I've got an absolute budget of this. Right, then that's important I understand that, because some of the things we've been discussing are probably not going to fit in that budget. So maybe we need to think about, oh, no, but those things are really important. Okay. Then maybe we need to think about what would need to happen perhaps for the budget to change. Maybe we need to do this in 2 stages. Allows you to have a proper conversation. So it's not the Anglian double glazing, oh, let's not answer the question. That's not what I mean. This is about helping you stay in your dive deeper and really get to the bottom of the issue. Remember, the issue is never the issue. They are using it as an opportunity to divert you, because there is actually something quite important there. So again, think about what sorts of things come up at this point and how are you going to reverse that. because otherwise you're allowing them to take control. Another issue or a concept that Sandra has is this one called dummying up. It's incredibly easy when you're the expert to know how to fix the problem. This is what happens. Well, you don't need to worry about that because we do this all the time. What you need to do is this, and this. You have to allow them to tell you how bad it is. Go, oh gosh, that must be dreadful. What people? So everybody's got the same code, have they? So you can't even tell who's coming in. Gosh, that must be really confusing. So if something went missing, would you be able to tell who was in? No, gosh. So how would that work? Has that ever happened here before? You need to allow them to explain just kind of how bad things can be unless they fix it. If you jump in and go, oh, that doesn't need to happen, we can give everybody their own code, then immediately, anything goes missing, you'll know exactly who's in the building. You haven't allowed them to explore that problem. And it could be the reason they're having this conversation with you is that they've actually had a series of thefts. But if you don't allow them that time, then they can't get to see how important this is to you. So this notion of dummying up and not trying to jump in and fix the problem for them. I'm just interested to ask here, have you ever found yourself jumping in and trying to fix the problem for them, Stuart, knowing you as I do?
I get fed up with people talking about their stupid problems and having to listen to it ad nauseum. I told you the first time, you're like, yeah, I got it, I know what we can do for you. Oh yes, but you don't understand. I do. So my biggest frustration when we're talking to people is that technical gap, that they somehow want you to miraculously give them all the information so that they can make a decision in a field that they have no concept of how it all fits together.
And it is frustrating, isn't it? So dummying up is challenging. When you can see how they need to do it, you don't worry about that, we can fix that. If you're in good sales mode, you need to dummy up, you need to allow them to tell you their stuff. Obviously there comes a point where that will stop. You just need to allow them to explore the problem, and for you to ask your questions, how much longer can that go on for? That must really be a problem. How much has that cost you so far?
It's just letting them talk themselves into the solution.
Yeah.
And nobody else buying it.
Exactly, it is exactly that, because by the time you get to propose it, they'll be going, well, this is perfect, isn't it? Because you've allowed them to explore the problem. If you don't allow them to do that and then you pitch, then there's, oh, it's a bit more than I was thinking, or I'll get back to you, because you've not allowed them to see how deep it can be for them, how much they need to spend, not just necessarily in money. Sometimes, it's in time, an investment in, the whole setup. It's going to take time from them, energy from them, and money from them. And if they're not prepared to do those things, it's never going to work. So if you don't allow them to explore the problem, they won't understand the power of the solution. So our pain questions. So we've now gone through these two layers. We've gone through our general phase, and then we've gone through our dive deeper. At the end of this, you should have a pretty comprehensive understanding of what's going on. You will notice at this point we haven't pitched anything. You haven't told them how they can fix it, and we ain't going to do it yet either. So are they serious? Now, when I said earlier that two people in the room had done something and one person had come across with a block, what we discovered is they were missing out this phase. And what typically happens in a sales system is people will do the bits they like the sound of, and the bits that feel a bit uncomfortable, they'll decide they don't need to do. And this is the one that is most likely to make you feel uncomfortable. It's challenged them at how serious they are. Now, for me, as I hinted just now, I will say to people, well, I hear the problem, it's got pretty bad, doesn't it? Or I can see the possibilities here, but the reality is, the advice doesn't come for free. There's a lot we can do together. But, we might be working together for the next year. I'm going to ask you to do a lot of stuff. I ask people to make commitments. There's a lot that you're going to have to do. There's a lot of time and effort's going to go into that. You're probably going to find yourself going into some new areas. You're going to challenge your comfort zones as well as the financial investment. Now, I don't know if you're in a position, if you want to do that yet. I don't know the answer to that question. Only you do. And it allows people to say, oh, well, to be honest, the problem isn't that bad. I wasn't expecting to spend a huge amount, or I don't have that much time. You have to allow them the opportunity, or they may come back and say, no, this can't go on anymore. I need to fix it. So my version of it is where I reflect back, this is going to take time, effort, money. Are you prepared to make that investment?
I like that level of honesty, because I've had sales pitches when people trying to sell me courses, DVD courses and stuff, where the implication was that if I wasn't prepared to sell my wedding ring, I wasn't committed enough to go on their course.
Yeah.
And obviously we're on record, so I can't kind of reply what I felt about it. Actually, no, do you know what? I don't know you well enough to actually give up my wedding ring and put it in the corner and say,
And you don't know where people are on that spectrum, and it's a good opportunity to find out, because yes, it might be bad, but it might not be that bad. It might not be that important to them.
If they reflected that back, if I wasn't willing to make that commitment to do that
Yeah.
with my jewellery, then I wasn't committed for that. But there was something wrong with me.
Yes, and it then becomes uncomfortable, doesn't it? And there's nothing about this process that should feel uncomfortable. But, I talk to people who, their business, whilst it's important to them, personal validation, from a financial perspective, it actually doesn't make a lot of difference in their life. They're financially secure. They don't want that much pain. They're really focused on their kids. It's kind of a part-time thing. And fine, who am I to say that's wrong? But we need to have that conversation. And if that's the case, possibly what I'd be asking for him is more than you would want to give. But if they're the sole breadwinner and it's all going badly wrong, then it's a different kind of conversation. This is our opportunity to discuss that. So again, you need to find out what your version of these questions are, because it is the pain of solving the problem more than the pain that they're experiencing. They'd love a new kitchen, but it ain't worth 60 grand to them. Yes, they'd love all of that. They'd see it in all the magazines. It's absolutely lovely, but I'm not prepared to put myself through that much pain in order to fix it. Well then, so for someone like you, Russ, what you might say is it's really interesting hearing what you've said. Typically, a kitchen, like you've said, is going to cost perhaps somewhere between 40 and 60 with a kind of, or 10 and 20, whatever it may be. You'll have an idea, let's be honest. And generally speaking, it helps if the lower number is a bit closer than the higher number. And it might be, and in your case, it may be, it's going to be 12 to 15. That's my gut instinct. How do you feel about that? It's a good time to test that budget, not that we'll spend another 2 hours discussing all of this. I'll go away and I'll prepare a quote, which I'll email you, and then I'll never hear from you again. If they've got a problem with the money, now's a good time to be discussing that. Oh, I was expecting more like about 5,000. Right. Okay, so I'm a bit confused, because you said you wanted marble worktops and everything lit from underneath and this and that and that. Maybe we can reprioritise some of these things which are the most important to you. This is the time to test that out. So this notion of bracketing the money, likewise for you, Rob. I hear all about your new website, new logos, business cards for 12 people, this and that. Typically, it's going to cost, say, somewhere between 4,000 and 8,000. How does that sound? Ooh, I was expecting more like about £1,500. Right,
Personalised the pain relief.
Sorry?
Personalised
Yeah.
the pain relief.
Yeah, and so saying things like I'm confused, oh, I'm surprised you say that, because it allows you that opportunity to go back around some of those pain questions. So, if there's an absolute upper limit on budget, which of these things is less important to you? It just allows you to explore that. And if you don't do this stage, you'll walk away from that sales conversation with a very different view of what's happening next to them. And they may be thinking, this is all sounding really expensive, but what they'll be saying is, oh yes, that sounds fantastic. So yes, please send the quote. Yes, we're really interested. But what they mean is, I'm going to look at your designs, and then we'll head off to IKEA. So what people say back to you can be quite confusing. So testing, are they serious? So what is that tipping point? What's the point where the moment of pain becomes so great they're prepared to make the investment, versus, well, it would be nice, but not that important. Are they really prepared to do what it takes? They're understanding the budget, understanding the decision-making process. If you've got any business to business, I mean, you will be, Rob, but I guess in quite a lot of yours are like, business owner people, is finding out who else are they prepared to go to the pain and presenting it all to the board, or maybe, so certainly for you guys, John and Fiona, understanding the process.
For me, that's husband and wife, because it's like
Yeah.
wife generally. Husband come back to you, and that's another way of saying.
And it's tricky, isn't it? Because you don't want to be that person that says, I won't come and talk to you unless both of you in the room, because that sounds really salesy, doesn't it? But actually,
That's the Windows people do that.
yeah.
They'll see the wife, they'll see both of you together.
Which isn't a bad thing. I mean, as I say, you can't insist.
It's understanding who's the advocate, who's the decision maker, who's the budget holder. They're not all the same people.
Yeah, so, and I think if you find yourself in that situation, getting them on board and saying things like, okay, so, if Bob needs to be there, so why don't we make a point, a conversation? Why don't we stop now? Maybe let's have a conversation with Bob. What would we need to put to Bob to really involve them in that process? What are the things that are really going to make Bob decide that that it's worth spending all this money? So I can see it's just the kitchen of your dreams. Let's make sure we get Bob on board. So you then become in this together. So it gives you that information. So yes, you don't want to be that salesman that says, "Well, I'm not prepared to talk to you, little woman." I don't recommend that as a process. So testing the series. Again, it's very clear. We haven't yet told them what it is you do and how you're going to fix it for them. We're still finding out about them. So we're now starting to move into that process. We're not getting into detail, but you can now start to build this perfect future. Well, it's great. I've listened to what you've said. I've got a bit of a clarity about the budget. I know how the land lies here. I know what's important to you. Let me explain how things could be. Wouldn't it be great if, or this is what your security system could look like, or this is how a smart home could work. And you start to sell this idea of a perfect future where everything's controlled by your phone, the rooms are only being heated when there's someone in them. When you're away from the home, it all switches off. Oh, sounds amazing. I love it. So you're selling this idea of a perfect future, maybe non-specific at this point, so which of your programs or plans or products you're going to be using, and you're getting their buy-in to the idea that this sounds fantastic, completely integrated website and branding, and that reflects all their different divisions, and it all coordinates, and it's going to work through on their PowerPoints. Sounds great. So we're selling the perfect future. Describe future, what difference it will make to them, how it will make them feel personally, emotionally, financially. There's lots of elements as to how it could be spiritually. And I've focused on you, Russ, there, but I'm a lady who spent a lot of money on my kitchen, but it is the centre of our house. It has made a huge difference to how we relate to our friends, when we have people over. It's made a huge difference to us emotionally and spiritually. I think don't be afraid to get real clarity with them about the difference you're going to be able to make. Who else will benefit? Who else is going to, is it, if the person's feeling better, is it going to impact on their family and so forth? So the perfect future. And only when you've gone through that, so we're now at step 6, only then are we then going to tell them specifically how you do what you do. At this point, it's a really useful point to check in and just with yourself, do I want to work with these people? Is what I do the solution to their problem? It's just a momentary thing, but if this is the point, kind of go, I've heard all of this and I see the problem, but actually I don't think I'm the right person to fix it. Because that's really integrity. It's worth checking. But assuming the answer to that is yes, this is where you go and explain. So what I suggest is that we do a kitchen from this kind of ranges. It will be this, or we use our web product or whatever it may be. Or you must have different ranges of products with for the playgrounds and what have you. What I suggest is for this, because you've said this is the product, it takes this long, it's going to cost something like this. You're now describing something much more specific. This isn't the time to stumble and bumble. You're going to start getting onto money far more, and as soon as you sound like you lack confidence in what you do, they will lose confidence. be clear and confident in yourself, and be really clear what the benefits are to them.
Quite often, just as the point where you hand over the price, it's handed over as an apology.
Yeah.
And that can make a real difference to how people perceive not only your business but your product and everything you've put forward as a solution. That if you're not confident in your price, do you think that the Ferrari salesman apologises for the fact that the car that you're about to buy or test drive is £150,000? They don't. They say it as if
and it's one of those classic. It's one of those classic moments. You say what it is and you shut up. It's very easy to kind of go, oh, it's gonna cost you 10,000. Well, when I say 10,000, I mean you can do it in 3 parts if you want. And I'm always open to a conversation. I'm sure there are some discounts in there somewhere. That I promise you ain't helping. All it does is make you sound very unsure about what you're doing. If you've done everything else before right, it will make perfect sense. They may be going internally, I can't afford that, but they'll believe what what you do is worth that money. So now we're clear what they're going to do, which leads us into our final part, which is the decision. And I can't tell you how many people just fail to do this bit. And again, we're handing control over. So for me, I tend to do these things on Zoom calls. It could well be you're face-to-face. It could be you're in a business meeting. This could have taken 2 or 3 sessions to get to this point. But whenever you do get to this point, you need to be able to say to them, okay, so where do we go from here? And what is your version of that question? Can I book you in? Shall we get that ordered? Where do we stand on this? Is it a yes then? Are we going to go ahead? What's your version of that question? What feels comfortable coming out of your gob is important. Because if, again, I'll send you all the stuff and get back to me when you've made a decision, or lacks confidence. You need to say, shall we do this then? So if you've done the rest right, it will feel natural. And if you go back to what Lucia said at the beginning, it felt like being me. It should feel comfortable. You've understood the pain they're in. You know what you're doing is right for them. You've checked in with yourself. You can help these people. Okay, shall we get this sorted then? Now, I don't guarantee that everyone's going to say yes, or they'll even say yes now. And you'll get a reasonable gauge pretty quickly as to whether there's a yes or even a no coming straight away. And I think it's always worth having a backup plan that says, I appreciate you might want some time to think about that, so why don't I send you all the information that we've just discussed, or I'll do a detailed quote for you, whatever it may be. But let's put a date in the diary now where we'll have a conversation. You can let me know if it's a yes or a no. And it moves us away from this think it over, where they have got all the power. It's okay to say no. It's okay for them to need some time. But what isn't okay for you is for all these people to be out there with your quotes and you go, I've got no idea whether any of them want my stuff. I've no idea when they'll get back to me. And now you're the guy on the end of the phone leaving voicemail messages and sending emails, feeling a bit of a twit. You should retain that power. Now, I can guarantee that when you phone people back or you agree to have that call, they won't always be there. That's my experience. Most will be. And most people are honest with you and say, I've thought about it. Yes, let's do this. Or I've had some thoughts about it. Could we do this? Or I've chatted it through with Bob and we love the idea, but it's just a bit more than we want to spend, could we? But at least means that conversation is still happening. But if you don't force that conversation, if you just let the sales conversation just drift off, you are giving them all that power. And that's a mistake. And if you don't ask, you will lose their confidence. It just feels a bit weird to me. If you don't ask for the business, you think, well, we've done all that, and I was kind of waiting for you to do the next thing, and you sort of just drifted out the door. I've just lost confidence in you. So, don't look at it as a bad thing. It's a positive and powerful thing that you can do, which tells people you're good at what you do. And if it's a no, and you're confused by that because you know what you do is brilliant for them, ask why. And it might just be, it's just too much, or got better off, whatever it may be, but find out why, because it could be you've just missed out some of those earlier stages that they haven't quite understood. It's not lost at that point, but if you don't ask, you won't ever know. You've got to be prepared to go back around that pain funnel again.
Depending on the business also, when you're putting in those quotes, you could, to show again that you listened, to put different level of quotes. So if we went for the top end...
Yes, those sorts of things really work, because it does allow that conversation of there is a solution, but there's this version and that version. But they both fix the problem, they fix it differently, and those do really work, because what that does avoid is you doing the big job for the low price. It's clear that the low price has less benefits attached to it, and you've outlined those, so no, that is a really good idea. And certainly if you feel there's some debate about the budget, and it might be, with the granite tops and without them, or with this kind of unit and with that kind of unit, they both solve the problem but slightly differently. Can work really well. Stay in control of what happens next, and so remember who is in charge of the call. So those are my essential steps. 2 years of training in 45 minutes or thereabouts, and there they are. So I think now's our time. We're going to have a break and we come back, because my big question is, what's the next step? You need to adapt that process to fit for you, and so we're going to ask some questions, have a conversation, and see where we go from there.
So the next step right now is to